will regret it.
Calvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, part of New Zealand's heritage is at stake here. New Zealanders have always been able to go around and participate in the outdoor environments and camp, as we've heard, and get up in the morning and go off and do some form of activity. Now, this is under jeopardy now, Mr. Speaker. It's under jeopardy because of this bill, Mr. Speaker. What we should be doing is focusing on the people who are dumping effluent, who are dumping waste and rubbish around the camping area. Focus on that, not on the act of actually parking up and resting overnight or sitting in your car or lying in your tent or in your caravan as you wait to go off and do some sort of activity the next day. I have to say that Kevin Haig has covered the issues really, really well. They're well thought out, and he's right. One of the main points I want to pick up on is the whole enforcement of this. The whole enforcement of this bill. Now, if you take the Far North District Council for an example, it's an area the size of Israel. It has 4 sort of service centre towns. It has about 30 or 40 little villages and hamlets. The problem is that there aren't the facilities around those towns and hamlets to cater for freedom camping. We need to be looking at the facilities, and what's happening instead is we're pinging people. We should be looking at the facilities, but the enforcement. The Far North District Council just will not have the staff to cover that whole area, to cover the 30 or 40 towns, the 4 main service centres. Will not have the staff. They struggle with staff anyway, just to do less sort of controversial tasks, and yet here we are sort of expecting that somewhere in the middle of the night there's going to be somebody who's going around popping up and knocking on the windows of caravans or cars or calling out from outside of tents to tell people to move on, and that's just ridiculous. It won't happen. So it's a nonsense trying to even including this in the bill. It won't happen in areas such as the far north. Last night we covered the fact about the notification and how we're actually going to inform New Zealanders and overseas tourists about about the areas where they can or cannot camp. And we've heard that it's going to be, these areas will be published in the Gazette, a publication that I have to admit I've never read. I've never seen, I wouldn't know how or where to access it. And as Honourable Rick Barker said, how on earth are people from overseas going to actually know where to access this publication and find out where that they can or cannot park up for the night? Not only that, it's going to be, these areas will be notified in the daily papers of Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Dunedin. Which edition, I don't know. What date that's going to be published, I don't know. But if it's published today, how will somebody who turns up next week in New Zealand know where to find out where these areas are going to be that they can or cannot freedom camp? They won't know. It's not like it's going to be the headline on the front page of the New Zealand Herald or the Dom Post. It'll be tucked away somewhere in the back pages. No tourist is interested in looking through the for sale signs and places to rent and that to find a little notification as to where they can or cannot park their caravans overnight. So, Mr. Speaker, those sorts of parts to the bill are silly. In fact, the whole bill, we say, is silly. We still don't know about the blanket bans. We see in the bill that it says there will be no blanket bans. Local authorities will not be able to put blanket bans on freedom camping, but that means that they may be able to just exclude a little area, a couple of car parks in one little town, and say we haven't put in place a blanket ban over the whole of the area, and they'll be right within their rights. So there's actually no definition of what size a blanket ban could be. So, Mr. Speaker, again we just say, well, this is a nonsense. This is a nonsense, and it's jeopardising the way of life of New Zealanders. It's something that we've been able to do since, as I said last night, since my tūpuna kupe turned up on the shores of New Zealand, who was New Zealand's very first freedom camper, because when he turned up and parked his waka up on some beach, he didn't actually stay there and build a permanent structure and live there for the rest of his life. He actually circumnavigated the whole of the North Island, naming places around the whole of the North Island. So he circumnavigated the whole of the North Island before heading back off to Hawaii. So, Mr. Speaker, it's something that we've been able to do since human first set foot in New Zealand. And I was just talking to my colleague Mita Ririnui, and we were talking about the absence of facilities and how his rugby club, he says it is the best rugby club in all of Bay of Plenty, and it's the Rangatoa Sports Club. He says their sports club is right on the shores of the Rangatoa Bay. And in the summer, they actually open up the facilities there, the ablution blocks, the club facilities. They have people camping on the sports field, and they get some income for their club. And I think that we need to do more of that all around New Zealand. There are numerous little sports clubs, little schools, marae, that could benefit from some extra income if the facilities could be upgraded so that they're of a reasonable standard for campers to camp on. And there we go. There's a way forward to create the facilities for freedom campers to use and to enjoy. And as Mita Ririnui was saying at Rangatoa Sports Club, they've been doing that for the last 40 odd years, and people have been returning year after year after year. So what we need to do is encourage local government. If we had that scheme that this national government's canned that could help improve facilities, if we went into sort of joint ventures with these sports clubs or maraes or schools, we could have a whole network of excellent facilities all around New Zealand that freedom campers could use, and then they wouldn't have to go and park in car parks in Nelson, as I saw there, and in other towns. We would have more facilities that could be looked after and used, and we wouldn't have the problem people just parking next to in lay-bys and places like that. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot more that could have been done. This bill isn't really all that specific. It doesn't address the real issue, which is the dumping of effluent and rubbish. Instead of targeting people who actually do break the law, and those are laws that we already have, they're actually making criminals of people who just need to park up before they head off onto their recreational activities or move on to the next part of the country that they want to see. And finally, I just want to end up with, finish off by talking about the effect on tourists and tourism. Free and independent travellers, they do land in New Zealand, they get into their camper vans, and then they head off and around. The last thing we want to have happen to them when they leave the airport is that or when they get back to their country of origin, get a bill in the mail for $200 because they unwittingly parked somewhere on the side of the road. Somebody took their number plate of their vehicle, and they end up with this bill. What sort of lasting impression is that going to have on New Zealand? Because what we want those people to do is head back to their homeland and tell all their friends and family what a great place New Zealand is, and then those friends and family return to New Zealand on the recommendation. They won't be recommending much if they've got this silly little fine of $200. Well, it's not actually all that little. A silly fine of $200 when they get back there and they think, well, what a miserable place New Zealand is. Kia ora.
Hilary Calvert.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to take a call on this freedom camping bill.